In 2001, a movie was released which would change the lives of that generation's children. It brought in more than $1 billion at the box office and turned its young actors into stars, and would make its creator, who was previously living in poverty, into someone with one of the greatest fortunes in the United Kingdom. She would even become wealthier than the Queen herself. With this film, the world was given a magical universe which continues to fascinate all who enter it to this day. Today we're talking about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Did you know that if Steven Spielberg had directed the film, the casting could have been totally different, and the movie, as we know it, would have never been released? Buckle your seatbelts, because today we're about to uncover all of the secrets behind this film and explain just how it came to be a classic of the silver screen. This video would be incomplete without an introduction to JK Rowling. The author's life was far from uneventful, and without much of that drama, Harry Potter would have never have existed. In addition to that, Rowling's life provided a lot of inspiration for many of the elements not only in the books, but in the movies as well. There are some very striking similarities between Harry Potter and Rowling's own life. As a kid, Rowling lived in a neighborhood in Bristol, a small middle-class English city in the universe of which would provide inspiration for the Dursleys, Harry's uncle and the horrible cousin who mistreat him in the beginning of the saga. It was during the same time period that Rowling would make the acquaintance of a brother and sister in her neighborhood. With the surname of Potter, she and the other kids often played witches and wizards pretending to prepare potions, but Rowling never exactly changed herself into a cat using the polyjuice potion. But it's still obviously more than a coincidence. Rowling's school director at the time was named Alfred Dunn, an obvious inspiration for the character of Dumbledore. When she was still a kid, Rowling's parents moved to the countryside and she attended a new elementary school, one of which she found pretty dark. She since then described the old-fashioned atmosphere of strict teachers who split the students into categories of good or bad, obviously, which is super unhealthy for the kids at the time. But you can't help be reminded of the magical sorting hat that assigns the students at Hogwarts into their 4 houses: Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. Rowling apparently made a bad impression on her teacher, who of course categorized her as one of the bad students. In middle school, Rowling would make the acquaintance of a chemistry teacher nicknamed Stinger, who she'd always remembered for his taunts, his dark personality, his strictness, and his sarcasm. Stinger provided the inspiration for the sarcastic Professor Snape and his hurtful taunts. This was also when the young Rowling first discovered Shakespeare. One of her favorites was The Winter's Tale, the main character of which is named Hermione. Rowling finally grew up. She was rejected from Oxford, the university and the town which would later inspire Hogwarts. And then she decided to go to the University of Exeter, where she gained a reputation for spending her time in the 600,000 book library. Remind you of anyone? After completing her studies, Rowling had an experience which would profoundly alter her life. Towards the end of the 1980s, she found work as a translator for Amnesty International and found herself reading the letters of men and women from Francophone Africa who were living under totalitarian reigns filled with violence and crime. Rowling said of the experience, "I began to have nightmares, literal nightmares about some of the things I saw, heard, and read. But the power of human empathy leading to collective action saves lives and frees prisoners." I mean, it's hard not to see these values reflected in the writing of Harry Potter. The saga plunges us into the depths of humanity, into fear, suffering, racism, and violence, into power and politics. Most of all, it shows us the power of coming together to fight against the scourges and the powerful friendship between Ron, Harry, and Hermione, and also the fidelity of their many loyal friends. It was around this time that Rowling took a train trip that will forever change her life. During the ride, she dreamt up of the story of a young boy who doesn't yet know he's a wizard receiving an invitation to a magical school. As you're no doubt well aware, it's a story she would come to write, though just not yet, because first she would have to face a variety of events and obstacles. To begin with, Rowling's mother passed away due to an illness. It was a shock, an event which meant that her mother would never be able to read any single line of the Harry Potter novels that Rowling would go on to write. Rowling transcribed the suffering she endured in the loss of her mother into Harry's feelings as an orphan. One of her favorite passages in the book is the one when Harry looks into the mirror of Erised, where he's able to see his parents. You know, the theme of heritage, of family, it returns over and over and over in the Harry Potter books and movies. Harry's parents are forever present, and especially in the fact that Harry procures the same exact Patronus as his father. Rowling also portrays a variety of complex child-parent relationships, including Draco and Lucius Malfoy. Draco carries the burden of his family history and is more or less constrained to follow in his father's footsteps. Then there's Ron, who's in a more loving family, but is still often seen as a burden. He's less brilliant than his older brothers and less sweet than his little sister Ginny. Finally, of course, there's Hermione, a witch born of Muggle parents, who has to protect them from the wizarding world, often at a great cost. During her period of mourning for her mother's loss, Rowling traveled to Portugal, where she met the man she would eventually marry. Her new husband, however, turned out to be violent, and Rowling eventually fled with her child back to England. Back in her home country, though, she found herself unemployed, a single mother, and she was just going through a horrible time, which she later described as disastrous. She fell into depression and struggled just to feed her baby. It was such a dark period, which later inspired Rowling's dementors, the evil creatures who bring despair in their wake. It's a feeling that's recognizable to anyone who's been through a period of depression. That weight which seems to just fall on you from the outside, and it's just all over, where you seem to be not able to do anything at all. From the depths of her despair, Rowling experienced a time of existential questioning about the meaning of her life, about humanity, and about many other themes, which we can find in Harry Potter books, the first book of which she finally wrote in 1995. The time had come to find a publisher, and did you know that no less than 12 publishers initially refused Rowling's manuscript? That's a pretty big number, and I bet you can believe they have massive regrets now. But Rowling didn't lose faith. She kept looking until finally Bloomsbury accepted the text, and it wouldn't be exactly a spoiler to say that it would become the smash of the century. But now it's time to get back to the heart of our subject, because very quickly JK Rowling would start to receive many requests from movie producers. Eventually she was signed with Warner, but only after refusing several others. And JK Rowling and Warner Brothers, well, they weren't about to do things halfway. As we noted in the beginning of this video, Steven Spielberg was first suggested to direct the film. But things got off to a bad start between Spielberg and JK Rowling. Why? Because Spielberg was absolutely set on casting Haley Joel Osment. Osment was a cinema darling, an actor that Spielberg had worked with before, notably Forrest Gump and The Sixth Sense. But Osment is American, and for JK Rowling, that was completely out of the question. She wanted a movie as realistic as possible and refused to give its roles to anyone but English or Irish actors. And she really stuck to her guns on that. Robin Williams, a star at the time and a family favorite, Hook, Mrs. Doubtfire, wanted to play Hagrid, but was refused the role. Spielberg also originally wanted to make an animated movie, saying that a live-action film would be too obvious and not enough of a challenge. Faced with J.K. Rowling's refusals on all other accounts, he eventually decided not to do the movie. You know, it's pretty crazy if you think about it. Just a few years before, Rowling had been practically on the streets, and now she was turning down an offer to work with Steven Spielberg. But he certainly wasn't her final option. 25 more candidates turned up to try out for the role of the director, and it was Chris Columbus, known for Gremlins, Miss Doubtfire, and Home Alone, who finally got the job. Even before his meeting with Warner Brothers, he'd written 130 pages of script. Columbus was a huge fan of the books, and he really wanted the job. Funny to imagine such a massively successful director feeling the same kind of stress I used to get before taking my SATs. But it makes sense when you know how many other directors were gunning for the same spot. Next up, finding the cast, which proved to provide its own set of anecdotes. This movie could have turned out completely different. We've already mentioned that Haley Joel Osment missed out on the chance to play Harry, but he wasn't the only one. William Moseley of Narnia also auditioned for the role, as did Game of Thrones' Thomas Brodie Sangster. In the end though, we got the following. Daniel Radcliffe as Harry. His parents were initially against it for fear of the media. Ruppert Grint as Ron. Ron was a huge fan of the books and had sent a video of himself rapping his reasons for why he'd make the perfect Ron Weasley. Emma Watson as Hermione. This one was an obvious choice according to the casting team, who said that she was a true Hermione who stood out among the thousands of other young girls who tried out for the part. Richard Harris as Dumbledore. Harris originally said no to the role until his granddaughter, a Harry Potter fan, told him she'd stop talking to him if he didn't take the part. Sean Connery had initially also been selected for the role, but turned down the part. I mean, I guess the Weasleys' flying car isn't as cool as an Aston Martin. Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy. Felton had originally tried out for the parts of both Ron and Harry, but ended up getting the role of Draco Malfoy instead. Sometimes it seems like the making of a movie hangs on by a thread. In this case, though, all the stars aligned thanks to one person, JK Rowling, and her high expectations. First off, we'd be remiss in not mentioning the superb quality of each of the final cast members. Each character was played by an actor who truly resembled them. Emma Watson, for example, turned out to be a real Hermione. She occasionally got in trouble in certain scenes because she'd learned the other parts and could be seen mouthing along with each of them on camera. Daniel, too, was just like Harry, pale, brown-haired, and just a bit undersized. And if you needed more proof that the trio was really made for these roles, one day the director asked the three to each write an essay on their character. Daniel Radcliffe wrote 1 page, Emma Watson wrote 15, and Ruppert Grint handed in nothing. It's exactly what Ron, Harry, and Hermione would have done. In addition, JK Rowling was granted a lot of artistic liberties and control over what happened in the making of the movie. She kept an eye on the smallest details, wanting it to remain as true as possible to the books as possible. Filming the first Harry Potter movie brought with it one pretty big challenge: the fact that they were filming with children aged 10 to 13 years old. The filmmakers did everything they could to keep the kids' lives going as smoothly as possible. There was a real school on set, and the young actors would spend 4 hours filming, followed by 3 hours of private lessons. The whole thing turned out to be a lot of fun for them, and many have talked about their positive memories filming. The success of the film also comes down to its final trimmings, including more than 600 special effects, including the dragon, Voldemort's head, the Quidditch scenes, and of course, magic. And the music composed by John Williams. The man behind E.T., Star Wars, and Jurassic Park, a legend of the silver screen. One of the final but most important, the movie was filmed entirely in the United Kingdom, both in a studio and the southeast of England, but also King's Cross Station, where the children took the train to get to Hogwarts, Australia House in central London, which played Gringotts, the London Zoo where Harry first spoke to a snake, parts of Oxford, including Christ Church, which housed Hogwarts Trophy Room, the Divinity Room, which played the school's infirmary, and the Bodleian Library, which substituted as Hogwarts Library, Alnwick Castle, which was used for the external Hogwarts shots, the Gloucester Cathedral and its cloister were used for shots of Gryffindor's common room. Leadenhall Market, one of the oldest covered markets in London, was used to create the Leaky Cauldron pub and the entry to Diagon Alley. All of the filming was done in interesting and real locations, which helped add to the realism you can feel in the movie. That realism, along with the incredible cast, brought in $1 hefty billion with all of the film's different releases. We'd say that's a successful adaptation. And what really makes a movie such an incredible smash hit is that it's all just so believable. Each character is totally three-dimensional, and as we saw before, many of them were based on real people and the experiences from the life of their creator, JK Rowling. Harry's world isn't a parallel universe, it's our own. That's the true magic here. It's not a galaxy far, far away, it's England. And the truthfulness of the story, the depth of its characters, and of its setting can all be felt on screen. It's believable because Harry Potter is more than a figment of Rowling's imagination. It's a branch of her life, her entire life. She soaked up people, characters, sensation, places, and feelings. And all of it was translated into a beautiful film with the help of Columbus and the exceptional cast. Harry Potter's universe is real, and JK Rowling is its phoenix. The release of the first Harry Potter movie was no less monumental than the release of the books. The film is beloved for the way that it ties together moments of fear with the humor and moving scenes. It goes beyond the usual frame of a movie for children. The film allowed the Harry Potter universe to extend beyond borders and across generations to reach the greatest audience possible. Still today, many of the franchise's films first discovered it through the movies, which brought faces, colors, and images to an already rich world. The saga's child actors have become stars. For some more than others, it's been difficult to get away from the associations they still have with their Harry Potter roles. To understand how beloved this series is, look no further than what happens when a remake is announced. HBO's TV show announcement recently caused a massive outcry. Harry Potter fans were afraid they wouldn't be able to recreate the same magic that they did on screen. It wouldn't be the same actors, the story wouldn't be the same. What about you? What do you think? Is it possible to ever successfully reinvent a beloved classic? Let us know what you think.